we can already prepare ourselves to jump into this adventure. So good evening, everyone. Good evening to you, John.
Good evening.
Also, good morning to those who are located in some distant part of the world. We happen to be in Poland currently with John, but we know that people from many countries were registering for this webinar. So it's a pretty interesting crowd. Welcome to this webinar series that is called Facing the Tiger, Unleashing the Human Spirit at Work. And this is the first episode of the series. We will be meeting bi-weekly. And our main guest and star tonight and for the upcoming webinars is Dr. John Scherer, who is founder and president of Scherer Leadership Center, but also international expert in leadership development and organizational development, regarded as a father of OD in Central Eastern Europe, praised by many, also very prodigious writer with books translated to over 15 languages, and his most recent book, Facing the Tiger, Unleashing the Human Spirit at Work, is coming up in just the next 2 months, so be ready for this one. As to this webinar, for the first 30 minutes, John will guide us through the world of facing the tiger, and also John will ask you questions, so also be prepared for some kind of moment of reflection, and to deepen your experience not only as a listener but also as an active participant. And then in the last part of this webinar, we will have an option to ask questions to John, and also hear you and what you are bringing to the conversation. So John, please tell us more about why the tiger.
Well, first of all, it's so great. People are in the chat box. There's a friend from North Carolina, from Texas, from California, from Canada, from all over. So and all over Europe. So this is just really cool. Let me just say that I just had my 80th birthday a few weeks ago, and it may seem a little strange for somebody my age to be just now jumping into the webinar business, but it just feels really right. And people have been telling me for a long time, especially you, Aditya, John, you've got to find a way to talk to people, interact with people, share what your thoughts are with people. So this is it. This is our first episode, and I can't wait to get started. So Aditya, should I share my screen now and just get going? Okay, here we go. You need to let me share the screen, and when you do, I will share the screen. Here we go. Let's go down here. Great. So this title has been given a lot of thought. This thing of facing the tiger. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to be doing here with this in this talk. This is what's really on my mind and on my heart to share with you today. I got 3 things. Of course, like a good sermon's got 3 things. One is I want to unpack what I mean by unleashing the human spirit at work, and why I think this is such an important set of words and phrases and concept and energy center right now for us to be exploring together. The second thing is what I mean by work, and it might surprise you. I hope it does. And then finally, why a tiger? What's the big deal about a tiger? So these 3 things. What does it mean, unleashing human spirit at work? What I mean by work, and why a tiger? So let's get started. Unleashing is a really powerful word. When I've been, of course, here in Poland now for 12 years, traveling all over the world, but have from a base here in Poland, first in Krakow and now in Warszawa in Warsaw. And the first time I was giving a talk to a large group of people in Poland, I had a simultaneous translator. I'm going to have a couple of examples of this. And when I said the word unleashing, she touched me to stop. So I stopped and she talked for a few minutes. And then afterward, I said, what was that about? She said, well, it's an unusual word in Poland, but I was able to describe what happens when you're holding a horse back or holding an animal back with the leash or with the reins, and then you let go. It's the opposite of holding on tight. You just let go. And that is actually capturing the essence of this. It's about freedom of movement. It's about being free to go free to go all out. In our leadership intensive that I've been doing now for 30 some years, I don't know, people from 52 countries have gone through this. And time after time, what emerges is, maybe for all of us to some extent, we have this river of energy, of creativity, of love, of commitment, of all sorts of things flowing inside of us, ideas. But by the time that goes through all the gates, like our mind kicks in and says, okay, hang on, wait, that may be too up, don't be too much, whoop. And we have all these considerations that we have to take into account. So what frequently comes out is this little trickle, like a little trickle of water. And there's this huge raging river inside. So the idea of unleashing is not just unleashing an animal, but unleash this river, unleash the flow that is in us and that is in you. The second word here is the human spirit, and that's what needs to be unleashed. And in that same talk that I was giving in 2007 here in southern Poland, when I got to the word, the title of that talk was called Work in the Human Spirit. And my translator stopped me, and she talked for quite a while. And then I kept going. And afterward, I said, what was that one about? And she said, well, in Polish, we don't have a really good word for spirit, for what you mean by spirit. She said, spiritus in the Latin, that will make people think, because this is a very Catholic country, that will make people think you're talking about something to do with the church. And I know you're not, that's not what you're talking about. And so she said, it took me a few minutes to explain what you mean, what you don't mean. So let me go into that a little bit. In the biblical story of creation, which is a fabulous, I just love that story. It's an archetypal creation story. All the major religions have some kind of a, where did the world come from? And it's a fascinating story. And one of the key elements in it is this concept of spirit. And the word in Hebrew, the Aramaic and Hebrew root is ruach. Ruach. And it sounds like, it's actually what in English we would call an onomatopoeia. Like pow or slam or bang, it's the word that when you speak it, it communicates the essence of that word. And so ruach is wind or breath or forceful air. It's air moving and making something happen. So I like that metaphor. I remember being a little kid and asking my grandmother, what is the spirit? I heard all this stuff about spirit. She said, well, see the wind? See those leaves moving outside the window, Johnny? Well, there's something moving those leaves. So what is it that moves you? What makes you want to get up in the morning? It sounds really silly, but what is at the core of who you are that yearns to be unleashed, that wants to be able to express itself in the world? And how have you found ways to do that? What is your ruach? What is the breath that's moving through you, and how does it go out into the world? Interestingly, when that word was translated into the Greek, they used the word pneuma, from which we get word pneumatic, pneumonia, having to do with breath. So all of the world's spiritual traditions have some connection with the breath. So how is your breath? Literally, how do you breathe? Do you hold your breath? Do you breathe here? Do you breathe deeply? How does life move through you? in the form of that kind of energy. So I think when I look back on it, I think my whole life in one way or another, even as a camp counselor, even as a combat officer in the US Navy or a swim coach, all the various jobs that I've had, when I look at it, I can see how, even though I didn't know what I would not have had this language, that what I was really hoping for and intending was this unleashing of the potential of the people that were in my care, either on my swim team or in my division on the ship. Oh, by the way, if you haven't seen the movie Greyhound, my destroyer was a sister ship of that exact ship. So everything except for getting shot at, that was my life for 4 years. So you talk about about the human spirit getting unleashed in those kind of circumstances. It's a really fascinating thing. So unleashing the human spirit at work. Now I'm going to go into at work a little bit later in more detail because it's so important. But the whole point here is that work. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it. So this is going to be about unleashing the human spirit at work. So I'm convinced that when we're born, we show up with an assignment. We've been given an assignment. Now, nobody told me this. It's not even true in any kind of literal sense, but I'd like you to think about this as a kind of a concept, an idea. Try it on like a shirt, see if it fits. That we show up with an assignment. First of all, it's a 3-part assignment. The first assignment is to be in continuous deep development into the full potential that we have, body, mind, and spirit. So the first assignment is not to be satisfied, not to be just stuck, but to be constantly exploring, who am I now in this moment? Who do I need to be now going forward? What is moving in me? It's this deep development into the full, developing our potential. I mean, this is a cliche now, the whole movement about that, but that really, I think, is why are we here? Why are you here? Years ago, I had a company. We went upside down. It was a really fabulous company, but we didn't know how to make money doing it, and we went upside down. And I called a really good friend, Dixon Delania. I was living in Spokane, Washington. I called a friend in Seattle, Dixon Delania, and I said, Dixon, I need help, man. Got wife, children, don't know what to do. This company went upside down. And he was talking to me, and he said, so what's been running you? What's been driving you? And some of you that have done the LDI and the EDI know this story, but I said, what's been driving me, Dixon? Getting out of debt and making it through the next month. And boy, I tell you, just saying that, I felt this burden, this load just come off of my shoulders. I felt this sense of real relief. And he said, okay, I got it. He said, is that a purpose worthy of who you are? That's a question that changed my life. And I said, yeah, right. I was put on the planet with a mission of getting out of debt and making it through the next month. I don't think that's why I was put on the planet. I think maybe I was here for something a little bit more than that. And he said, well, okay, but what is a purpose more worthy of who you are? And I said, I don't know, Dixon. He said, well, how about that tagline of yours, unleashing the human spirit at work, and so on. And I said, oh, that's a marketing thing I just made up one day. And he said, okay, well, call me because I can't help you until you figure out what you're here for. So about a month later, I called him. I said, okay, Dixon, I figured out what's a purpose more worthy of who I am. He said, what is it? And I said, it's unleashing the human spirit at work. It turns out it's not just a marketing statement. That lives right here in me. So the whole concept, this first element in the assignment, is to be continuously discovering who we are. My book, The 5 Questions, I'll give you the whole book in 3 sentences. These are 5 questions that change everything, except the one thing that never needs to change. You don't need to change yourself. You need to come home to yourself. This changes everything. So I think this first one is all about that, coming home to ourselves. over and over and over again in every moment. What does life need right now from me in this moment? There's so many things I want to tell you about that. Secondly, the assignment is to fully express who we are into the world, to be developing who we are, and in that process, expressing our best self into the world. And I would say expressing our process of development in the world. People have told me that one thing that strikes them about me is how transparent I am about my process, about what's going on from moment to moment. I hope people understand that I'm just trying to fully express what's going on, and not just try to put on a show. Look, aren't I wonderful? But let me show you how I'm not wonderful right now. And that's this whole work about the shadow, which we'll be getting into later in these episodes. So be in continuous development, fully express our best self into the world. And then third, in a way that contributes to life. I'm convinced that I remember my early training taught me that when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, I remember people telling me, because I was very small. I used to be small, and now I'm this tall. What a breakthrough that was. That people who are all wrapped up in themselves make a very small package. I remember my grandfather telling me that. Johnny, people that are all wrapped up in themselves make a very small package. So from the very beginning of my early training, my somebody training, I was oriented outward to the world, to be in service in some way, to contribute in some way. Now, it doesn't mean you have to, go into a nonprofit or whatever, but if you're sitting in a corporate board meeting, what do you have? What is your soul, your essence? If you were to fully express the best of who you are into that moment, what is it that would be a contribution to what life is calling for? Some years ago, a couple of colleagues who I think are on the webinar here, we went to Kenya with some business people. I've been back a few times to work with the Maasai people, and the tall, they wear the red shukas and so on. And at one point, I traded one of the warriors my wristwatch and my binoculars and like a Leatherman tool. I traded him for a spear and a shield. I mean, this is an incredible thing. It was on my wall in my apartment in Seattle for many years. And then a couple days later, I was talking with our friend Kakuta, who was the young warrior elder who kind of created this whole thing with us. My dear friend. And I said, Kakuta, I'm having a little bit of a trouble. He said, brother, what is it? And I said, no, it's okay. I said, I can't tell what time it is. And he said, what do you mean? Well, I traded my wristwatch to Kaboli for a spear and a shield. And he said, here, take this. And I couldn't find it. I looked for it, but I moved to a new house here and I couldn't find it. He gave me this leather bracelet with beads, beautiful beads all over it. And I said, what is this? He said, well, this is a Maasai wristwatch. And I said, okay, how does it work? And it had a circle, on it. And I thought maybe I'm an Eagle Scout, so I figured you take a toothpick, and do something with the sun and all. And he said, okay. He pointed to it. He said, look, it's time to be doing exactly what we're doing right now. Do you see that? This is clock time. Use biblical language. This is chronos. It's 12 minutes till 8, John. Where are you supposed to be in your presentation? Very important to have that kind of thing. This is, what is it time for now? What does this moment need from me in this moment? 5 minutes before we started, I changed the slides. I was thinking about you. I was thinking about what I wanted to say, and I realized that there was something else that needed to be said. It was time for something else. So what I want you to be thinking about constantly in your development is this question: what does life need from me right now? What does this meeting need from me? What does my relationship need? What does my partner? What are my kids? What does this life need from me? I'm convinced that there's more life where that came from. So this thing about being in continuous development, I got a question for you. Are you, and I got this, it's a great question from my friend Art McNeil, who is in Florida. He always likes to ask, are you a finished product or are you a work in progress? Which means you're still in development. Now, I've asked this, I don't know how many, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times to people. So far, I've never had anybody raise their hand. I say, how many of you are a finished product? And how many of you, and nobody's raised their hand. I used to say, if you're a finished product here, you take the magic marker, but I'm just afraid somebody will just for the heck of it say, yeah, I'm going to take over now. So are you a finished product? Think about it. Or are you a work in progress? Are you still developing? Are you still growing? If so, then there's hope for all of us. So here's a question I want you to, in the chat room, if you know how to use the chat room, just take 5 or 10 seconds now to jot down, where do you, if you're in development, if you're a work in progress, where do you go to help you with your progressing? Read books, nature, workshops, your religious practice, friends, where do you do your development? Write your answers down in the chat box, and Edith is going to be looking at those, and possibly later in the webinar we might come back to those. But where do you do your development? All right, Edith, anything showing up over there?
Not yet. But now we're starting to have a lot of training books, drawing art, trusted mentors, nature, on stage, very diverse responses, I would say. Writing, work, home, with my patients, family, walking between trees.
Beautiful.
Books.
That your spirit will find a way to develop, even if it's not formally provided. Your spirit, it's like has this urge to be contributing and to be developing. So look at those answers. So I want to offer something here. What I mean by work. It's when we were picking the title for the book, Unleashing the Human Spirit, I said at work. And we had a long conversation about that. What if it scares people off? What if people who don't get up in the morning and go to a corporation, of course, not many people are doing that now today while we're all sheltering in place. But they said, John, what if people don't have a job? What if they are at home, or what if they're homeless, or what if they're, if they see their what they do during the day is something other than going to work? Is that going to narrow down people that, oh, this book is not for me? And I said, well, I want to run that risk, because what I mean by work is what you find yourself doing from the time you get up until the time you go to sleep. The word work comes from the Greek erg, E-R-G. If you remember your physics, an erg is a measure of how much energy it takes to move 1 gram, 1 centimeter, something like that. So work is actually purposeful effort, purposeful energy, okay? Which became Werk in the Old German, which then we got the word work. So I want to add to that, this phrase. This, I heard it first, those of you that know me know I've been doing yoga for, 50 years, virtually every day for 50 years. And I went at one of the first yoga retreats that I went to, I heard this phrase. This is like 40 years ago. So look how it stuck with me. When I heard it and understood it, it just went bang like that. I just got it. It's something that, it was almost like, oh, that's for you, John. So Seva is, it's a Sanskrit phrase. Seva is your work. It's what you do during the day. And the idea, and sadhana, the word sadhana, that's your spiritual practice. Like if you play tennis, your sadhana is to go out on the court and hit balls. That's your sadhana. That's the work that you do to become a better tennis player. That's your practice, right? And so Seva is saying that your work, what you do during the day, can be uh, seen as, held as, can actually be a practice to help you develop into the fullness of who you are. And to understand that, you have to understand the word develop. Back in the day, remember when we had film and we took the film to be developed, right? When you look at it, there's, I don't know, not much you can see on the film, but as soon as you put it in the chemicals and the film is developed, something emerges. And so the word develop comes from the old French, you know how I love language, développer. And développer, if you have a holiday and you're opening your packages and you're looking in your packages, what you're doing is développing your packages. You are unwrapping, you are discovering, unfolding. It means to ripen, to expand, to evolve, to expose. I love this. So to be in development means to be in a constant experience of discovering, unwrapping, unfolding, ripening. Aren't these great? Expanding, evolving, exposing more of what's there. So this whole concept of work as Seva as sadhana means your work can be a place where you develop. That what you do from the time you get up till the time you go to bed. That in our leadership intensive that we do after the thing is over, it's like a 4-day thing. It used to be when we got together to do it, and frequently people would later, when we're on the phone calls later, they would say, you know, I just haven't had time to practice. There's just been too much going on. And I always think, oh my God, that's like wanting to be a better tennis player and saying, I couldn't practice. There were too many balls being hit at me from across the net. Every time, every ball is an opportunity to hit it back, to raise your game. So everything that happens to us, and I love this quote by T.S. Eliot, that everyone gets the experience, some get the lesson. Like this sheltering in place, this whole COVID thing, we're all having an experience. What's the lesson? What's the lesson for you personally? What are some things that I'd like to have one of the webinars be about that? What are we learning? What are you learning about yourself? What are you learning about relationship? What are you learning about communication? What are you learning about life, meaning of life? So this whole process of develope, okay? So here we go. So your work can be a time to practice developing who you are. Now, why the tiger? Well, this is why the tiger is so important, because it is a key element for me in the whole concept of developing, of seva as sadhana, your work becoming a practice. I recently had a heart, some kind of wiggle in my heart thing. It turned out to be a wiggle in the machine, not in my machine, but in the other machine. But anyway, I had to run some tests. And at one point they put me on a treadmill. I'm an old runner, so they put me on the treadmill and they put this radioactive stuff in my bloodstream. And then they tracked it. They traced what my heart did with it. And so that trace element told them some stuff about my heart. So this is like a medical diagnostic technique, inserting a trace element and tracking what happens as it moves through our system. And this is the function of the tiger, okay? Many years ago, I was doing a workshop in Oregon. I still remember the CEO's name, Stan Long. It was an insurance company in Oregon. And I remember I was about to speak. He was introducing me and so on. And he was talking to all of his managers, like 300 or 400 of his key managers sitting in this big auditorium. And he said, folks, he said, this is a jungle here. A lot of people, a lot of tigers in this jungle. And if we don't face our tigers, we're going to become lunch for the ones that do. And boy, that you can tell, this is like another thing, 30, 40 years ago, bang, I got that. And so the whole concept of the tiger stuck with me. And when I started thinking about development and doing as a therapist, working with people, this concept of a tiger really stood out to me. Because when we have a tiger in it, like if I ask you right now, what's a tiger in your life? What are one or two tigers that you have? Like it might be um, like a decision that's difficult for you to make, or a person that's difficult for you, or it can be big, like should I quit my job? Am I in the right relationship? These big existential things. Or it can be as simple as, what about this phone call? So I love this concept of, in fact, the first of the 5 questions is, what's confronting me? What's coming at me? And we use the metaphor of the tiger. And those of you that have been through the LDI, please forgive me. I want to share this story for the people that haven't. If you were in the jungle and a tiger came up on you, what would be the fundamental instantaneous human response? Turn around and run. And of course, the people who live in that part of the world say, okay, then you're dead. Because if you run, your chances of survival are essentially 0. Okay, you might as well forget it. They say, however, if you turn and face the tiger, and as I say, it might still eat you, but the tiger is going to stop and think about it. So this is a very profound thing that's happened here. In the simple act of maybe very courageously turning and facing the tiger, in the simple act of turning and facing, you have created not a guarantee, but a chance, a possibility, a chance of a different outcome, just by simply turning and facing the tiger. And here's the key thing. This person that you're avoiding, or this decision that you're avoiding, if you think you're getting away with something by not facing it, think about it. You wouldn't be calling it a tiger if it wasn't already kind of chewing on you. So you might as well face it and at least create a chance of a different outcome. Now, the tiger then, as you can see, reveals what is your, like, let's say you have a situation and it hasn't been resolved, and it's been this way for a while. Well, if I ask you, what are you doing that isn't working, that hasn't worked, and you can list some things. I've done that. Well, these are your defaults. And I would say, okay, now you've learned what see this, it's like tracing what happens through your heart. The tiger shows you what your default is. The tiger reveals for you, first of all, what you're doing that's not working. And secondly, the fact that it's not working. It's like, now what? Now what am I going to do? So it's a fabulous, fabulous teacher in that regard. I would say, how is that working for you, what you've been doing? So the tiger becomes a very, very useful way of figuring out something that's not working. Not like as a negative, but as a positive. Now, what do I need to do to face it? So what is your tiger-facing approach? I'm going to ask you to think about these. And if you would, later I'm going to ask you to put your top 3, your first 3 in the chat box. I'll tell you what my 3 are. These are 7 ways that people have approached a tiger, and then we're going to wrap up the seminar and maybe have a conversation here. The first is to freeze. Like when the tiger comes, and this is my first response, especially if it's someone I care about, someone I love, or if it's a relationship at work that means a lot to me. When there's a conflict and I'm somehow involved, my first reaction is to freeze. Like a deer, we have an expression in English, a deer in the headlights, like, oh my God, how did I get here? So it's to stop and stand and stare, become paralyzed. What happened? How in the world did I get here? Another possible response is to fight. Come on, tiger, bang, bang, bang. I'm going to engage you in order to win, to overcome you. I'm going to beat you. So it's to move toward the threat in order to defeat it. Okay. Then there's to figure it out, analyze it, mentally step back, even if you're still there physically. Internally, you step back and you're kind of analyzing in order to understand something. So be thinking about which of these are your sequence. And then another option is to try to fix the situation, solve the problem that caused the upset. I had an insight some years ago that part of my conflict, my tiger-facing thing, was what I was trying to fix was not the problem, but the upset. I was trying to figure out, what do I have to do to help this person not be upset with me anymore? That was a great insight to have. Another one is to flee. is to disengage, to avoid, to move away from. Okay. And then there's to finesse. If you understand bridge, you play cards, it's to try to slide around the issue, hoping to not lose. Use finesse, kind of. And then finally, to face, which means engaging, not to win, not to defeat, not to overcome, but to understand and resolve at a fundamental level. So let me tell you what my sequence is. And then I want you to be in the chat box. What's your first response, and what's your last resort? Those two. So my first response is to freeze. And then I try to analyze, figure out what's going on, and then try to fix the upset. My last resort is to fight. So put these in the chat box. You could just write the first word is your first choice, and the second word is your last resort. Let's see if there's a pattern here. What's your first response? It might be to fight. It might be to finesse. Might be to face a tiger. Maybe you're a very evolved person, and boy, when a tiger comes, you're right there. Yeah. So take a minute now.
We already have some answers.
Are they coming?
Yes. Fix,
Great.
freeze, fight, fix. Yeah. Stress.
What are some of the last resorts?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the last resorts that did to the second? What's the second words there?
Face, flee, finesse, freeze. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of diversity here in answers. Mm-hmm. Finesse, figure out, avoid, fix, face again. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for all your input here. Yeah. Face, freeze, finesse. Mm-hmm.
Great. Now, something to consider is that that you have a default, like I call it a default pattern. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's a familiar thing. And the people who know you, if you told them this, they would go, yeah, I recognize that about you. It wouldn't be a big surprise to people. And I want to suggest that you think about your last resort as what we call a stretch, something that could be a stretch for you. That maybe you're missing moments. Like I think I'm missing moments when I really need to fight. I really need to say no, yes, no, boom, boom. Just that, thus far, no farther. That's a boundary I will not cross. You shall not pass. That there are moments because that's my last resort. So think about this, that whatever your last resort is something that you need to look to see if maybe this moment, what is it time for now? Is it time for my default? Is it time for my something else? So that you begin to expand your repertoire, and I'm hoping in some other episodes that we can work on that. Okay, I've been going now for a while. The idea was that I would present some things, trigger some things in you. I hope now that you'll take a few minutes, if you would, and just jot down some of your responses, questions, and then let's see if we can have some kind of a dialogue here. Let me see if I can get back here. What is your tiger facing sequence? And then let's have some kind of a dialogue in some way. Mm-hmm. What's the best way, do you think, for us to
Q&A? So if you can use the option Q&A in Zoom, we will be able to ask questions. And we will try to respond to that with John.
Okay. Should I get out of my?
No. You can. Actually, you can turn off the presentation so that we could see you better.
Okay. Stop the share, maybe.
Yes. Stop the sharing. Yes.
All right. Great.
Mm-hmm. And let's see if we will have some questions coming.
Wow, we've got 110 people. My gosh. Oh, and this is lovely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is this recorded so we could review the wonderful content possibly? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That was the first question. You can also ask questions about the concepts that John was sharing. So the second one is, can the tiger be a situation that you are dealing with within you, like a feeling of insecurity, a lack of motivation, for example?
Great. That is a great question. Whoever asked it, that is a great question. If there's a first name attached to it, I would love to.
Sita B.
Sita. Okay. Yes, and in our leadership program, maybe a third of the tigers, 2/3 of the tigers are either people or external things that are coming at me from outside. But about a third of the participants in the room talk about the tiger being something internal, and I mean the same principle applies. What am I avoiding? How is it costing me? What have I tried that hasn't worked? And I remember I was working with we have a solo version of this intensive that we do, where one of our coaches works over eight sessions with somebody using the 5 questions, and this particular guy, this C-level executive, was stuck, and he said, I'm fed up. And I just said, well, you're not fed up enough, apparently. I said, when you get, that expression, to be fed up, I said, when you get fed up with being fed up, then maybe action can happen. So usually when the tiger's internal, we have maybe guilt or shame about it, or why can't I fix this or something. My middle son, David, teaches me a lot. And he says, shame, Dad, stands for should have already mastered everything. So you need to give yourself permission to be struggling with this thing, Sita, and then take a look at what might be possible if you could create a breakthrough. And then ask yourself, what would I have to put at risk in order to experiment with some new approaches?
Mm-hmm. We have one more question. Adrian Wagener, what if my ego keeps playing up, wanting to fight all the time?
Welcome to the human race. Yeah, that is a really, really big one. Well, this is what all the spiritual paths have to offer. Maybe you could practice, some mindfulness. I think these questions, how is it serving me? Okay, here we go. When you're thinking, thinking is talking to yourself, right? Well, who's listening, right? This is a great question. So this conversation you're having with yourself, and so you've named this. Okay, my ego. It's my ego. Okay. As soon as you name something, then it has a life, right? And so how is it functional for you to keep this character stopping you or advising you incorrectly? Because all continued behavior is functional in some way. It's serving you in some way. Having this thing called the ego, this voice that you listen to, having that control or guide or influence, whatever word you want to use, having that constantly, and then you finish the sentence. But the fact that is a theme that happens over and over tells me that in some way it's functional. So I would ask you this: what is it helping you avoid? Or what is it helping you maintain? And it's usually some variation of safety and looking good. The ego, or whatever you want to call that, it has a mission, and the mission is to continue to help you look good and stay safe. And safe means familiar, something familiar. Mm-hmm. So these are questions that will help you begin to kind of push against those boundaries. Yes, it did.
Yeah. So that was actually Livia. We got this a comment because husband and wife are listening together. So
all right, you guys, go for it.
Both with us.
Yeah, play this again and listen to it between the two of you.
Terry Rogers is asking question: is default tiger response a function of one's somebody training?
Oh boy,
Terry. Somebody training.
Seattle, go Hawks. Okay. Yeah, one of the things is by the time we're 5 or 6 years old, we have been trained. This really wonderful man named Ram Dass, he died a few months ago. Very, very powerful spiritual teacher, one of my favorites. And he had this concept which I've loved, that when we're born, we automatically become part. In fact, I just saw this. This is amazing. I found a stack of yellow stickies because I moved to a new house recently here in Warsaw, and I found a box of of stuff that I was carrying around for 25 or 30 years, including a bunch of yellow stickies that I was from 25 years ago. And Terry, look at what one of them said. Somebody training from Ram Dass. That was 25 years ago. So that really, it's just right here. I was just looking at it. So what somebody training is, when we're born, the people around us become our faculty, and they are training us to be somebody. And they're training us not to be just any somebody, but a certain kind of somebody, the family system, the community, the culture, the values, certain behaviors. Boy, by the time I was 5 or 6 years old, I had figured out what's the deal. We figured out what's the game, and what is it that we think we need, and what kind of person should we be. And my mom and pop were off somewhere. My pop was an alcoholic newspaper man, God bless him, and my mom was off trying to keep the marriage together. So I was raised in my grandfather's church, who was a Lutheran pastor. I was raised in the parsonage with my grandmother and a black African-American maid that worked there, and a Lutheran nun. That was my somebody training faculty. And boy, I learned really early on that I was loved, greatly loved, but I felt alone. Like, where's mom and pop? And so I tried to be a really good boy. And boy, I catch myself now at age 80, like 75 years after my somebody training, with that same impulse to try to be a good boy, try to be a good man. Okay, nothing wrong with that. It's having to be the good boy all the time that's the problem. So we'll come back. Thank you, Terry, for that lead. And that somebody training is when a lot of these patterns got started.
Mm-hmm. So something that slightly relates to this one is next question from Michael Murray. Is a human being ever a finished product, or is there a time in a person's life to stop, rest, and coast?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Austin, Texas, another precinct heard from. Yeah, I'm a kind of a Zen Lutheran, as you know, Mike. I'm a kind of a Zen Lutheran, and efforting and pushing all the time. I got to develop. It's exhausting. And so my friend Barry Johnson, who I'm going to have on here as a guest at some point, introduced to me this concept of polarity thinking, where there's two things that have to go together. There's efforting. There's development that comes from efforting, and there's development that comes from doing absolutely nothing, from relaxing, from accepting what is. You put your finger on it. Like, if you want to take a trip from, say, New York to Los Angeles, you have to start in New York. You can't start in Phoenix, which is a lot closer to Los Angeles. You have to start where you are. And the first step in transformation is to fully embrace, like, as a Gestalt therapist, there's this concept called the paradoxical theory of change. So when somebody came to me for therapy, they usually wanted to change something. That's how I got this thing about you don't need to change yourself. You couldn't do it anyway. Paradoxically, the first step is to just completely accept and embrace the reality that is right now. And that gives a tremendous relief. So Mike, you really put your finger on it. This being in development can be interpreted like a type A, I got to go. And if that's the case, then the other pole of the polarity needs to come into play. What is it time for now? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just finish this edit. I was getting ready for the talk. This is my first ever webinar. And I was, wound up, and I just said, you know what, I'm just going to, we've got a bunch of IKEA boxes here. So I just opened an IKEA box and started following the instructions, just kind of being in the moment. And that kind of, so that I could be present here. Thanks, Mike. What's another one to do? Maybe just give me the first name. People might not want to be outed.
Yes. Okay, so we have one from Anna. Was it possible for you to love the tiger and change him into Kitty?
What actually happens in our program is people go home after this thing about facing the tiger, and we have phone calls and check-ins afterward, and I don't know, 9 times out of 10, a lot people will say, that tiger turned out to be just a kitty cat. We hear all the time, a weird thing happened, John, at my EDI or my LDI. A weird thing happened. while I was gone, when I got back home, everybody had changed. And of course, what has changed is the way you see things. And so the tiger is an interpretation of some kind of something that's happening between you and another person. So once you alter, Wayne Dyer had a great saying, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So, my wife, Catherine, used to leave stuff all around the house. And it just drove me crazy until I realized she's an artist. And this is her studio, So it is actually possible that the tiger is just a kitty cat that needs to be loved. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, about the tiger and shadow. How to find acceptance of your shadow, to not constantly try to struggle with it, but simply go with it as a partner. And this one is from Tomasz.
Okay, so you've had some thought about the shadow. And I mean, those of you that, there's a way you're trying to be in the world and a way you're trying not to be. This is the kind of fundamental, I'll give you the developmental model that I've been working with for a number of years. There's how I'm trying to be and how I'm trying not to be. And quite often we invite people to pick characters for the character that we're trying to be and the character that we're, trying not to be. And then it's a simplified way of kind of working with the energy that's present, the internal states, that go with those two things. And my persona character is Indiana Yoda. This Indiana Jones combined with this Yoda that was given to this group gave me that. My shadow character is President Trump. And so when you have a shadow character, you make a list of all the things that you can't stand about that character. And then take each one of those words and look to see what is a precious, sometimes crucial gift that's embedded in that very behavior that you can't stand about your shadow character. And that's what you embrace. You embrace your shadow character as a teacher. This has been a real hard one for me. I've been doing this with myself for 30 some years. And as soon as I took him on as my shadow character, it was very, very hard for me because it was so loaded with a lot of emotion. But as I began to look at him and I saw he doesn't care what people, he's like a bull in a china shop, right? Especially after this debate from last night. A bull doesn't go into the china shop trying to break things. The bull just is being the bull, and things break. And I'm so concerned about, I'm leaning way so far in the other direction that there may be time. What's it time for now, John Scherer? Is this a time where you need to just relax about whether what you're doing is gonna hurt somebody's feelings or is gonna offend somebody? These are all those little gates that things have to pass through. So what I would say is, if you can't embrace the whole shadow, begin to look at elements, what the shadow has to teach. In our last intensive, one of the women had, her shadow character was Cruella de Vil, the woman in the movie who killed the dogs to make fur coats and stuff like that. And what the element that this woman saw that Cruella had, that she was totally self-absorbed, self-centered. And this one realized that many times, she's missing a moment when she could just go for something that she wanted because she was constantly programmed to take care of other people. So if you can't boil the whole ocean because the shadow's too big, just take chunks from the shadow and see if you can embrace. Let that person be. What do they have to teach you? What are they really good at? These are great, Aditya. Are there some more?
So we have one from Sabrina. How do you unleash your human spirit in this time where speaking your truth often ends up in internet backlash or getting called out or cancelled?
Boy, you need to talk to somebody who's fluent in social media. I really have no answer with that. But what I would say is, if you're in a community that can't or doesn't honor who you are, the fullness of who you are, you need another community. Don't hang out with those people. Find kindred spirits. That's what I'm imagining. There's 100 and some people here that we're in some way on a path. That's why one of the reasons I sat in front of this, one of my favorite paintings here, that, find people that are on the path with you. And, you don't have to only hang out with those people, but let yourself not have to be with people that are basically harming you, punishing you for being who you are. You do not need to be in a place like that.
Mm-hmm. We have a slightly different topic about confronting your communication style from Hester. Would you say changing communication style to face your tiger really helps in case of a difficult relation with a manager at work, for example? Or do you have other more impactful suggestions in mind?
Boy, these are fabulous questions. I mean, you could tell people if you've thought a lot about this. What's the first name?
Hester. Hester. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing right, but if not, my apologies for this.
That's okay.
International audience. Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. A long time ago, I found out that I was training. I was essentially a trainer. I was a therapist, and I was a trainer, and I was like doing training programs for people, and I was teaching them conflict, skills and communication skills and so on. And I got feedback after one session from a group of executives. They brought me in to do some organizational change stuff, and one of them said, "You remember that workshop you did with our boss, and you gave him all those communication tools?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Thanks a lot." And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, he was a kind of guy who left a trail of bodies. He was a very destructive boss. And what you did was make him more efficient and effective as a destructive boss." They said, "You gave him techniques to use against us." And boy, that broke my heart. And I thought, I don't want to do that ever again. So that was a moment where I made the distinction between techniques, which are on the outside, and where a person is coming from. So in your case, new techniques would be great. And in fact, when you come home to yourself, things change. What happens on the outside changes. But if you're still coming from a place of anger or fear or punishment or whatever that come from is, even if you develop other nonviolent communication skills are really excellent, but if you're really ticked off and you really feel like punishing that person, it's going to sneak out, it's going to leak out. It will come out in these moments when you're not expecting it. So paradoxically, to make a really significant change on the outside, you need to do your work on the inside. What do you need to heal inside about this other person? Is there any way to heal at that level? In fact, my friend Terry, who just was, who spoke a minute ago, had a situation like that between him and another senior executive in his organization. They've been trying to make it work and trying to be good to each other, but boy, they were just underneath it, really, they were like that. And the minute they went off and had a chance to, at least they never got to be great friends, but they came to respect each other. And that completely changed the way they interacted with each other on the outside. So I would say make the shift on the inside and then basically trust the process for the outside.
Mm-hmm. So maybe two more, like a very quick, because we have just a couple of minutes left. From Isabella, how to deal with a passive aggressive behavior? And my reaction is reactive with passive aggressiveness. How to change this?
Well, now we're not going to do that in 2 minutes, Isabella. But man, this is so hard. I want to answer. I want to respond to all of these. Okay. Now this, I'm not going to give you advice because I don't know enough about your situation. I see a lot of people have to leave, but I would report out. When in doubt, report out. Now, in some cultures, this is not like in Asia and other places, you would never do this. But if someone is being passive aggressive with you, I would suggest telling them, describing something they did, behavior, without any interpretation, and then share with them, what happens on the inside of you when that happens. That's the only thing. You can't manage another person. You might be able to influence them, but that comes from inside.
Yeah, that was a challenge too.
Well, right now, come back over the next few. We're going to do this every 2 weeks, so maybe the answer will come down the road.
Yeah. So last one maybe. Does lazy count as a tiger, or is that a reflection of something else? From John.
Well, if you're being lazy, see, it might be somebody else who's lazy. Okay, we'll deal it very quickly in both ways. If it's somebody else who's lazy, lazy is an interpretation. They may be enjoying relaxation or something like that. That might clearly, lazy has a lesson for you. What is it that lazy people have no trouble doing that every now and then it might be time for you to do? So I would take lazy on as a message to you that just try it on as a concept. You need to practice being lazy. You need to practice, close enough is good enough. I'm going to take a break, letting other people do stuff, all those kind of things, and see what happens. Hey, I don't know how we wrap this up, Edita, but let me just personally say before you bring it to a close that I'm just really delighted by this, and if it's been meaningful to you, that's great. I hope you'll come back. I'm just gonna do this as long as it's meaningful to people. So every 2 weeks. So Wednesday, 2 weeks from now. And is there something about the book? I mean, if people are interested in the book, Facing the Tiger.
Yeah, if you want to mention this a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
yes.
Go for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you like the concept of Facing the Tiger, John is just now releasing his latest book under the same title, and you can explore more, find more examples there and more inspiration. And the book is available if you go to the address facingthetigerbook.com, and also every 2 weeks we will be hosting a webinar where John will share a bit more about the world of the tiger and how to face him and what kind of adventures you can have on the way. So thank you, John, very much for this very inspiring evening.
Thank you, Edita. And I'm gonna read all the chats. So whatever you said in the chats, I will definitely read them. So thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Have a great rest of your day and a great week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.